All right, good morning. It's 10:01, so to be respectful of everyone's time, I think we can go ahead and get started because we have a full, exciting agenda. We have some new faces, some old friendly faces, just so everybody knows if everyone's in the room. It might be helpful to just go around and do introductions and starting a balance.
All right, Alan Fitzgerald, Chief Information Officer, Department of Public Safety.
Jeffrey Powell, CIO for Department of Agriculture.
Mitch Rouse, Chief of Staff, DHS.
CIO.
Ken Anderson, CIO, Department of Labor and Licensing.
Blake Collins at DFNA.
Mike Ford, Senior Assistant Attorney General.
Robert Magucci, Data Officer.
Matthew Sparks, Technology Manager for ARData team.
Gary Vance, Chief Information Security Officer for TSS and DIS.
Davis, Chief Privacy Officer.
Brian Rogers, Assistant Director in Workforce Policy and Innovation, new organization in Department of Commerce.
Okay, Chief Information Officer for Department of Education.
Carter, CIO of Department of Health. Corey Scott, COO of Data Scout.
I'm Allison Bragg with the Inspector General's office.
We have latecomers ask that they introduce it. For opening remarks, I'll keep it brief because I really want to jump in and make sure we have ample time to talk about our main topic, but just a few kind of additional items. We talked about the formation of AI and Analytics Center of Excellence at the last meeting and nomination. Thank you so much for that. We recently received the final appointees from the governor's office. The appointees and their secretaries have been notified. We'll send out the full list of that after the meeting, the meeting packet. The first meeting is October 10th, and then we'll meet the second Thursday of the month through October 2025. The AI Center of Excellence is a sub-panel or subcommittee of the Data and Transparency Panel. We've had those for to where we can have members outside of the DP membership, but also kind of a subset of the DP membership, really kind of focusing on something actually. Parashut and a few others really kind of like got together and focused on development of the Arkansas data sharing. First times, including how we approach the longitudinal data system data. The sub-panel DTP, we will include the full DTP is optional on those. You're not expected to attend every month. So just that is for awareness, but it's welcome. We want to be inclusive. We really want everyone to have a voice in, bringing challenges, concerns, opportunities, et cetera, to drive this process to what we need for our state. We will make sure as a subcommittee of the DTP that there are updates in our quarterly meetings. While we were waiting for the appointments, we can gather up resources. I went to Center for Public Sector AI, Secretary Putnam and Jeff Team from DHS, and that Justin Brown, Director of the Center for Public Sector, and will actually speaking at the Arkansas Digital Government Summit. And it's our recommendation at the last session of the day, and I think making his acquaintance because they were really pulling together a lot of good, useful resources. They are kind of starting with a focus in the human services domain, just because Justin Brown was a former Secretary of Human Services in Oklahoma, and that was kind of his domain and who he knew, but it's not intended to be limited to human services. Starting with what they did. That seemed to be a very pragmatic approach. They had a lot of good support from just digital response, GSA, and Code for America, a lot of really good partners. We're also gotten moved into kind of gone around and found the AI efforts with the National Governors Association, US Digital Response, and kind of going out to find and secure those resources for our state. So we've been busy in the background getting those resources together, and we'll get those all pulled out to have a library and a set of both information, but also additional help from government and nonprofit to assist the DTP and the AIC. So that information will be. We're also separately working on kind of a safe environment where we can do any kind of pilots testing, particularly of our LLMs in the environment. We have a sandbox environment that's very secure, where we can use that. Happy to discuss that anymore in the open discussion, but I wanted to really kind of transition over to the main topic for today, which is probably one of the most germane topics for this. And so some have been from the beginning since 2017, but today we're talking about the ARData data. The DTP was largely established to develop and manage and govern a statewide data warehouse in response to General Assembly findings around duplication of data and equitable lack of access to data, challenges of sharing and integration and use of data out of the Open Data Task Force. The 2017 legislation recommended development of a statewide data warehouse as a result, but we had to do a couple of studies as approved, a gap analysis, comprehensive feasibility study. Through those efforts and then subsequent work with the ALC data sharing and data driven decision making, so the community task force, we of course corrected a little bit to a data hub approach, which is primary difference is that data warehouse lets you look in the rearview mirror and batch the direct objective. It doesn't help much with the operational sharing, the challenges we sought to address. The data hub really addresses operational and there's been a lot of work with data sharing agreements, with architecture and things like that. It's been in limited operation for about 3 years. Certain departments for certain use cases, but especially with the injection of some ARPA funding to really scale it out and sustain it, we're finally to the point that we can actually start making it available to all departments for self-service use, and particularly for this body, managing and getting in governance concerns. It's like as we start talking about statewide master data management, things like that, there are definitely topics that we'll need to work out as an executive level data governance body for the state. I want to make sure we keep this very interactive. So if anything's not clear, let's talk about it and see, well, how are we going to do this from a governance consideration? We don't have to solve it today, but we want to start identifying those so we kind of know what do we need to work through to kind of facilitate the ultimate goal, more efficient and effective data sharing. So today we've got Matthew Sparks, who's our technology manager. He's really done a lot of the heavy lifting on getting this extraordinarily complex architecture stood up, and will probably be the primary point of contact for your teams, getting individuals onboarded and supported. And then we've got a few additional guests from IBM that are technical experts to make sure that we got the deep bench for any questions. So I can really kind of cover the high level business impact governance questions. But then I want to get really nerdy. You've got that bench as well. And Gabe from TechD, who's an assistant integrator who's providing some additional support as also. So we've got the full team. Next. We're going to kind of give an overview, a reminder of the data hub, just a very high level overview. But there's a few pieces that we really want to talk about today that are foundational. They're by no means the extent of the data hub, but I think they're most germane to why this body was established and what the legislation from 2015 to 2023 was really driving at. So for cross-agency data sharing, security and governance, data virtualization, Matthew will explain that, master data management, and a data catalog, and then Matthew will kind of hint at the rest of the toolbox. We kind of call it toolbox because this is a robust platform. There's probably 40-something components in it. Nobody's going to use them all. We just want to make sure that they're available so that as some, there's a need, there we can use it. All we really need to know is that kind of awareness of like what tools we have in the toolbox. So if we go next. So at the very highest level, Data Hub, as defined back 6/34/2023, is a statewide shared service like data infrastructure to facilitate sharing, integration, accessibility, quality, standardization, governance of data. And these particular words, they go all the way back to 2015 legislation through the OGDF. These are the kind of core objectives. So this is what success looks like and what we're trying to solve. And we're getting. And we're going to go super, super high level. This is way zoomed out, but just as a starting point, the Data Hub is ultimately to facilitate sharing, integration, and use from a data source to a data consumer. The source and consumer can be labor types. They can be in the same department. They can be across departments. They could be across sectors. And there's a lot that happens within Data Hub. If we drill in a little bit and we break out that data sources, we start getting to some of the challenges that we historically had, and kind of why we're here today is we as a state, as we're trying to serve the whole citizen, that residence data is spread across a lot of different sources. These sources are at different departments. They could be across different types of databases or other types of storage. They're stored in different formats. They might have different representations and semantics. So it's a non-trivial task to really kind of pull that all together and get that complete view so that as we're serving the same individual collectively as a state in series or parallel, we can get that full picture. And so these are some of the things that the Data Hub's really seeking to address. So now we're going to break down the Data Hub into drill in a little bit more. There's a lot more to it, and Matthew will start getting deeper in. But the kind of three foundational pieces that we want to talk about today are data virtualization, and that's what's going to kind of abstract all these different representation sources, formats of data, and the ability to kind of like see this fabric of like the whole resident we're trying to serve with one 360-degree view. Master data management, which is the way that we can understand the same resident spread across 50 different systems represented different ways. It's the same real world person. And the data catalog, which helps with management of the quality of the data, the governance, and provides a lot of supporting metadata or data about data used in the data virtualization to be able to allow that sharing while staying compliant with the FERPA procedure, other regulations. So now I'm going to turn to Matthew to start going through, and from this point forward, I'm going to just stay like very interactive and make sure that everybody has a good understanding of kind of like walk this together and make sure that we're all in understanding and identifying any kind of like potential governance concerns or issues that we need to like go through like today.
Okay. So behind that white box, it says data fabric. So on the last slide, we broke down into sections. The middle section is what we're calling our data fabric, and that's a new term maybe for some of us. So we really wanted to get high level with what is a data fabric. So simply put, very high level, it's a tool that allows us to connect all the data, no matter source, in a secure environment in real time. It simplifies the data management and it allows for, once again, real time use of the data. So it makes it faster. We don't have to do a batch. And it's all with security and privacy by design. So we wanted to break out, since we have some CIOs here, The advantages of the Data Hub security. Go ahead.
So going to, what is data fabric? Explain what it is again.
So it's a tool or system that would allow us to easily access state data or share state data in real time with a bunch of obviously different services within it.
So the data hub then is built from data fabric.
Data Hub is a data fabric.
Is a data fabric.
Yes.
Yeah, there are a few different approaches to implementing the data hub. Fabric, I mean, like Fabric's kind of getting a little bit more specific with our particular flavor of implementation.
That he was kind of mobilizing the data. Or something. That it's from all these different sources and formats and so forth.
That
It's
is
part of it.
part of it.
Yeah. So, Data Hub security, it's in an on-premise environment. It's hosted by the state of Arkansas over in our data center. The authentication into the system is our internal Active Directory, so there's nothing where we have to turn it over to CIOs or data stewards and say, hey, manage your people. It's all managed centrally. We have done the due diligence of adding the ability to add multiple Active Directories. It doesn't just have to be because I know that, for example, DFNA has their own Active Directory and they manage their own. So once we onboard DFNA, we have the ability to add them in and it's a seamless experience and it doesn't even show up as it's different. So by default, the inbound and outbound connections are denied. So when we start getting in, you may try to make a connection to your source system and you're going to get a denial. And that's by design. And it allows us to keep security within a firewall and all that fun stuff. The data is secured by industry standard, industry supported encryption. So it's encryption at rest and in transit. The application itself undergoes vulnerability scans, penetration testing, privacy assessment, security testing, patch management. And then the layers of security are really multiple layers. It's physical, so the hardware, network, firewall, internet connection, and then application, which is the actual system itself. And before we get into the details, we really wanted to, because data sharing is kind of a scary word, kind of a scary couple words, we don't all, she's gonna have to do it on her screen.
Okay.
Do you want to do that real quick? Okay, so data sharing. It's like I said, it can be a scary word for all of us because we don't, we're controlling of our data, which is understandable. But this system is not necessarily data sharing. We can do data sharing through the system, but by design and by default, it's more of a data discovery platform. The data sharing is always going to be controlled by the data stewards. So we'll get to it further on, but there is catalogs, which you saw on the agenda, and that really allows for data discovery. So I can go out and quote unquote shop for my data. If I have a project, I can go out and figure out if I'm DHS and I have a need for some education data, I can go out and see what education data is there. And then obviously contacting the agency data steward to set up data sharing agreements and all that fun stuff.
I think it might be easier to think of it's more sharing of access and sharing of data.
Mm-hmm.
The original kind of approach is build a data warehouse. In that, we would have said, okay, we're going to take all these databases and we're going to have another big database. We're going to make a copy and have this big thing where we're actually sharing the data. In this case, we're facilitating the ability to go the other way. and kind of share very fine-grained, very nuanced access to data, or even just data about data. I know we do a lot of checks from, just about every system to is someone employed, whether they're earning, things like that. And I think that probably answered many questions Commerce does about the wage data, what it has, what it doesn't, the latency, things like that. So in this case, Commerce could publish out, okay, this is what's available from wage data. This latency, this is what you get. So even before sharing the data, they can share just the information about the data for discoverability and just knowing who's the steward. Okay, want this, and you did initiate data sharing agreement. This is who you talk to.
And a key point that I really want to point out is when the different agencies publish their data into the catalog, it is not a copy and paste into it's really a connection that grabs from the source system every single time, and it's a snapshot view. So the data is going to always live at the source system. And so another key point, and a thing that I'm really excited about, is there's over 90 plus source connectors. And what that means is built into the system, there are source connection types, from AWS to any IBM DB2 instance we have, to Oracle, to SQL Server. Those are all built into the system. And then obviously there's an API connection that can connect to just about anything. And then the data sharing, the data discovery in the system is always going to be in a protected view. So the view is that snapshot of the data from the source system. And so the protection will be defined by multiple people. It'll be directed by the State Cybersecurity Office, by us, and by data stewards. So we have identified a few example use cases for going forward and presenting the different key components of the system that will really help, hopefully, it resonate to different agencies. So the first one we have identified is there is a flaw in a process where corrections and Arkansas Court Connect don't communicate data. And so when an individual is incarcerated and they have an upcoming court date, Arkansas Court Connect doesn't know that individual is in prison. They currently don't share data that way. And then vice versa, corrections doesn't know that this individual has an upcoming court date. And so individual misses court date, gets issued a warrant. If they get out of prison, they're picked right back up and they're recidivated. Yeah. So that's obviously a not good thing. So that's example use case number one that we've identified.
And this was it was identified by the legislative resurrection task force at the last meeting, and corrections and I were kind of giving an update on the data. The courts sort of brought this, hey, this would be really handy now, so that we're not issuing like a warrant for failure to appear when that's outside of that individual's control. And corrections said, also go the other way. If corrections need to, they can make arrangements for appearance via Zoom or something. That example where we can open up security and governance, a way to share one way or both ways, whatever makes sense for this.
Use case number two is also involving corrections, because corrections has used the system the most. We're heavily involved in it right now. Is whenever an offender undergoes the intake process, a corrections staff member has to call school districts because they have to gain their high school diploma if they've achieved a high school diploma or the equivalency of that, which is a GED. So that happens upon intake. And the way this is done today is correction staff calls, which is we've learned around 700 times a month to the different school districts to search for and confirm that the offender has attained a high school diploma or the equivalent of. So, yeah, next.
Is your data?
Yeah, it would just be Arkansas for now.
That's an
That's a good
excellent,
point.
thing
Yeah.
to bring up. But that's an excellent question. Thank you. And so it might not completely eliminate the calls, and then it gets it on the radar. Like we've been working towards multi-state data sharing for employment, earnings, and post-secondary education, but we haven't really talked much about multi-state sharing of secondary, which actually is all states have access to. So that's the thing I'm bringing out to kind of wants to see, and if the juice is worth the squeeze, how much the things bring.
So first key component is a tool called data virtualization. And what this is, it is the tool that will allow us to connect to the multiple different sources, no matter what the source is, whether it be SQL Server, AWS, Oracle, across the different agencies. It doesn't matter if it's cloud, on-prem, it doesn't matter. We can literally pull it all up into a single unified view in a matter of minutes. I was able to, I used some dummy data. We set up a SQL Server database and a DB2 database. And I was able to connect to those two databases and pull them up into a unified view in under 5 minutes. And they're linked. Obviously, the data sources need to be, the databases need to be somewhat same, right? So we need to be able to have primary keys. It's the simple database stuff. You need to be able to have primary keys and be able to match on them. But what this does, it's a real-time data integration tool that allows for that unified view of the different data sources. And so once again, we're going to keep talking about this. It's data protection and governance is all over this system. So if I'm not supposed to see data, if I'm just a regular viewer, I'm not going to see the data. Data stewards will be able to see the data. So there's going to be bi-direction of, like I said earlier, the CISO office and ARData. There will be policies put in place to allow us to mass data and all that. So the way that data virtualization can help with use case number one is we can connect to Arkansas Core Connect and corrections database, whichever the data stewards tell us to connect to. Pull those up into a single table of view in the data hub with data protection and governance on top of it, and be able to share out to Core Connect or to the correction staff and provide a report or a table to be able to look and say, hey, this person does have a court date coming up, and I need to be able to arrange maybe a Zoom call since they're in prison. And vice versa, the court can say, oh, this person's in prison. We need to contact corrections and see what we need to do to get them to be able to attend the court date. And then the way this can help with number two is we can connect to so GED is hosted by Commerce, high school is hosted by Education, and then corrections is obviously the offender. And so we can connect to the three and pull up, once again, into a single view and be able to say, this offender has a high school diploma or this offender has a GED.
Big difference from the maybe more common or traditional way of doing this is as opposed to like the data warehouse. We're not moving mass amounts of data. Right? So if there's an intake and corrections, they put it on this, an individual, it allows for that query to get broken up and go to different places and just come back and just bring that answer. So it's just taking the smallest possible so that the data in real time.
And once again, it does not matter if it's DB2, SQL Server. The system brings it all up into a single common language to be able to be read by user. I wanted to do a demo, but it really is a matter of minutes. If we're able to have the connections and all the things in place, it's a matter of minutes that it pulls it up into the system. So it's a really fascinating tool. We have some screenshots of the system too, but so you can see the dummy data that I put together. It took me under 5 minutes to do. On the right side, there's the middle dot, and that is going to represent your view. On the top right, that's an IBM DB2 instance. On the bottom left, that's a Microsoft SQL Server instance. And we used some dummy data. It's Go Cells data from IBM that we tied an employee on the left side. We tied an employee table from Microsoft SQL Server. On the right side, on the left picture now. On the left side, it's the employee table from Microsoft SQL Server. On the right side, it's the manager or the employee history table that has the manager information in it. And that's from DB2. So you can see that it's really small, I know, but on both of those, there's a little blue dot on the left column, on the right side of the left column. That's identifying the primary key. And that's what we're matching off of. So it's the employee code. You can use SSN. You can use a bunch of different things to match off of. You can have multiple keys. Go ahead, Amy.
Can I ask a question? This is probably a very basic question. So I see 3 animals in that picture. Animal number 1 are the input sources. DB2, SQL Server. Animal number 2 is the hub. Number 3 is the thing you made where you can view. What do you call the thing you made where you can view?
It's called a view. Yeah.
View.
Yeah. And so and the way we need to think about a view is a snapshot of the data from the source systems. We're not moving the data from the source systems into, we eliminate that connection data.
So if the TV set where that view exists, does it have a different name? It's just called set of views. I understand it goes blank as soon as you're done.
So we can identify it, the actual table that's created is called a view, but we can identify it with schema and table name or view name or whatever. If that's.
No, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a name. It doesn't have a name.
And
if you've got it.
If you're in the system looking at it, to put it together, because allow something to query multiple sources, that's there for you to make sure that it's doing what you want it to do. But usually that's going to get layered on an API or something so that the system
It's like
can do that.
API.
It's just letting you know what that API is going to see, or a report or dashboard, whatever the consumer needs.
Do you use only one key field?
You can use multiple.
Yeah, and that's a sneak peek. That's why we need the master data management,
Yeah.
because not everything has those clean keys. Sometimes we do, but it can't get.
That's going to be put on my analyst to build that relationship for this view.
That's some of the things to work out. We want to make sure that we've got the training, the support system, that we're ideally taking friction out of the process. We're making it easy. Make sure that we're doing the right capacity. We've been doing a lot of capacity building on the evaluation research side and getting that figured out. Now we're working on the operation.
What is the real logic to make this? We're using the connection code and then a snapshot.
So I know this
Something
is,
you said about, it will be available by APIs. Now APIs are real time, right? It's not.
yes. So it can be all of the above. So like I mentioned earlier, there's over 90 plus different of those connectors So if we have identified a database being a SQL database, we're going to use the Microsoft SQL database connector. And so that would be ODBC or whatever. Now, if we have the need to connect to something via API, we have an API connection. That way we can go grab it via API. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Other agency also has to be API ready.
Right.
That's-
Yeah.
It's any of those connectors on either side.
Yeah.
So it's just that translator with the governance and
So
the.
does the agency get to choose which type of details, like ODBC connectors are available to you?
Yeah.
It's just a tool. It's just like the advanced ETL tool that can work in real time.
Yeah, if you would prefer, if you have a SQL server, but you would prefer it to be an API, totally cool, we can do API. Yep. It doesn't have to be, it's really going to be, and that's the beauty of this, it's really going to be whatever you prefer. And we make it happen.
Some things will eventually go.
Right.
ODBC to API.
Yeah.
Is this system intelligent enough to determine proper PKs between these disparate systems?
So
You want to go ahead, you want to just go to the master image?
you just, yeah, we just go ahead.
Let's just go to the master image.
And every part of this system uses AI to try to help somewhat. It's never going to completely involve that human in the loop. It's going to do things like when you're first cataloging data, it uses AI to say that based on the data, that looks like an SSN, that looks like a first name, whatever, but a human still has to review. It's just take a lot of that data off. Can detect candidate primary keys, but still needs to review. So it's sort of, it's trying to do a lot of easy stuff just to maximize the use of the expert. When it comes to a person, a household organization, but particularly let's just keep it simple, say a person. If everyone had a complete and accurate and SSN, we'd be good. Just link on SSN. That is not always the case. Not every system has SSN. It's not always correct. There are typos. We've seen, and especially when you're linking across time, by the time someone's like working at Commerce and they're in wage data, they have an SSN. If they were particularly a foreign-born student in their post-secondary time, and they could up to 60-70% of the time not have an SSN at the time that they're in college. So we try to do that linkage based off of that. It doesn't work. But when I know we have some incident resolution experts like our engineer, we get really detailed about this. But it can't always be this equals that equals that, and that equals that. This is in first name, last name, date of birth. So that's where master data management, which we can get more complicated later, but it's doing very robust, what's called instant resolution across a lot of different things and in a probabilistic way. So it's really kind of saying, like, what is the probability that these two records refer to the same real world house or organization? This is probably where we're going to have governance discussions the most and the earliest, because there are a lot of decisions to be made. I mean, master data management is the essence of governance and action. Because the way it works is I have the same individual spread across 50 different systems, and they could be in there multiple times in the same system or in different systems. So we're bringing together all of those different references. Systems are full of references to people, not little people. But then we have to resolve across that and really kind of compare each record to each other record and kind of say, do we think these refer to the same person? And it's not as simple as a yes or no. It's, we think that, okay, there's a 95% chance that's the same person, or there's a 12% chance that's the same person. And we can set thresholds, and that's a decision making together. And we'll do it very conservatively. And that's the way we have been using this in practice for the past few years, with where we can allow the system to automatically make that match. We feel like any reasonable person would do that. We don't want to waste human time. But there's that, so we can allow it to automatically say those two records do not represent the same person, or those two records do, based on the thresholds. But there's this area in the middle, and but we can't automate that. You know, that best practice, a human needs to look at that, and that is called clerical review. And that's one of the key things that we've been running a master data management system since 2009. One of the reasons from some of the changes we made with the data hubs to get this clerical review function to say when someone falls in that middle zone, we still take away for a human to look at that and make that final determination one time and then record it, so nobody ever has to look at that again unless there's change. So some of that's where, you know, we don't have to go into the details now, but we'll talk about, okay, so if we give GD example, the corrections records come in and there's a GD record and it looks like it's the same person, but it's not close enough to automatically just say that, you know, are those two records then viewed as corrections, education, that's like what, who looks at that and what are, you know, and how does that something that I really haven't made those decisions because I want to make that collectively as a group, that right, you know, balance of utility. Some other things here, data consolidation. If we've got these 50 records that pertain to the same person, one's, you know, we could have, most of them have the same date of birth and one's different, but it's a typo. And then we're going to have these conflicts and we're going to kind of, and they have different attributes. Some might have gender, others don't. Some have educational attainment. So we're going to pull those all together to give a consistent identifier to say, okay, now we've got one consistent key or identifier that represents this individual across all these systems. And that's really the kind of, we've been using that for in our department for the past 15 years as the glue across all of these different systems. That combined with virtualization is what really facilitates that whole issue. But as we pull together that what's called the golden record, there are decisions about what gets survived. Summaries, if you've got 50 records and 49 at the same date of birth and one at a different date of birth, that's pretty straightforward. It's most common. That was probably a type of other things can get all that more complicated. For you want the most recent value, or you know, is it like, well, for this type of data we trust ASICS, for this type of data we trust DM. It's by the system. There's a lot of variety there, and that is the essence of governance and the types of things we want to determine, or at least have review and awareness together, because we're really figuring out what constitutes that golden record, and then once we have that golden record, who can see that for what purpose in what way. The last thing on the previous slide is consent management. We don't need to go in that there. I just want to flag that that's available because that's been used heavily by in this exact software. It doesn't have to be, you know, or it could be other software. But this particular software for MDM, this is used heavily by Sonoma County, California for shared case management, because there are things where it can be driven by consent. If someone's going to say, okay, I have a you know, Snap client, would you consent to sharing of your Snap case record over with your WIOA case manager? That needs to be recorded somewhere. That's something that is built into here, and that gets used heavily by some other jurisdictions to facilitate the management of that consent that can then be used in those views to say who can see what by either role or consent.
Okay, so the last key component that we're going to talk about today is something called a data catalog. And so this tool is really the beginning of a project's data sharing journey. So it's where I was talking about earlier, where DHS has a need for education data. They go into the data catalog to see what data is out there. And that's the data discovery piece. It's very self-service when you're shopping for data. By default, all users on a public catalog, you can have private catalogs. On public catalogs, you will have viewer access. That means that all of the data privacy and protection rules will apply to you. And if there's an SSN column, you will not see SSN. But if there is specific data there that the agency, data stewards, and administration okays for it to be seen, it can be seen there. And this is right along the lines of, this is a snapshot of the data from the different systems. There is also a piece in this called data lineage, which is the ability to see a specific asset, where all that asset has been used, the transformations along the way. And then there's data quality, and there's a data quality dashboard in a data catalog, and this is specifically used by data stewards to be able to assess quality of source data and be able to identify, okay, where does my data need to be cleaned up? Go ahead and go to the next slide. So data discovery, it's a very easy self-service tool. There will be master catalogs for each agency within the system. So I'm looking for education data. I can go find education's master catalog, and I can go in and I can search for specific things. So if I'm looking for, back to our use case, if I'm looking for a high school diploma, I can go in and I can search for high school diploma, and we can easily find, hey, this table has high school diploma, but is this what I need? This table has high school diploma. Oh, now this is what I need. This has this student has attained a high school diploma. So it's also where you can view and see not only technical metadata, but the business metadata. So it really appeals to business users and be able to tell, because metadata is data about the data, right? But it breaks it down into business metadata. So if I have an SSN column, it's going to say United States Social Security number. So the next thing, do you have something to say about that? Okay. The next thing in this is data lineage. Kind of already hit on it. It's from end to end, the life of a data asset in the system. So I'm able to see where the data asset's been used, what's happened to the data asset, and this tool can be used by data stewards to be able to identify, oh, my data column isn't showing up properly. What's happened to it? Where did it happen? And it helps. It's an easier way to pinpoint exactly what's happened to the data asset.
That can be, I've got a view of the data, but it might not be full unrestricted. There might be some filters, there might be some transformations. Just understanding that too, so you have an understanding of what it is you're looking at, but also the lineage past that, because we build on these views, but then it's been shared, and people have built processes on that, their dependencies. So say we just one very real example. Sometimes we make identifiers larger. Okay, this was 25 long, and you've got to make data that used to be no longer than 25. Now it's going to start bigger. That can break things down. Right. So just like we would do with any IT asset, we need to be able to, when a change is going to occur, kind of understand the impact and communicate and mitigate that impact before we just go. That's really just a tool for our having these sort of shared views. Disruptions from any abstraction.
So the next thing is a data quality dashboard. So in the catalog, and then, like I said earlier, this is really going to be crucial for a data steward of the agency. So there's a profiling dashboard and there's a data quality dashboard. Obviously, the data quality dashboard is going to tell you the quality of your data. So it's going to be able to identify if I have an SSN, if something that looks like an SSN in a column that is not an SSN column, it's going to be able to identify that and say, hey, you have issues here. It's going to give you a quality score like 85%. And then it's going to be able to tell you, okay, I found this. There's maybe inconsistent values, or most of these values are 9 characters long, but this one's 20. So it's going to be able to identify those things for you. And on the catalog itself, there's different roles, and we'll hit on this in a second. But the data steward will always be the asset owner and the data catalog owner, and that will allow the data steward to be able to see the data. The reason that is important is because the data quality dashboard does not work if you can't see the data, because it's going to be masked or it's going to have some kind of policy assigned to it. So you will not, if you're a data steward, you will not actually be able to see the what it's telling you about what's wrong with maybe with the quality of the data. And once again, it's governance over all the data assets. So it's what we just hit on. Any questions there? Yeah.
That's what we've been working to drill down.
So key thing here is this is going to be the data catalog is going to be the most public facing of the data within the system. And because the reason,
Within
state government, yes, sorry.
we have, they're completely separate
Yeah.
things for like external researchers, things like that. This is squarely for
Only
state employees on official business.
only state government employees have access to this system. It's behind, you have to be on the network to be able to access the system at all. So the data governance policies that are in the system will be developed by the direction of Mr. Gary Vance sitting next to me in his office, along with our team. So these data policies will have data privacy rules in them, which is masking of data, obfuscating, filtering, redacting, or just completely denying access to it. There is going to be value in putting your data out there, even if you do deny the access to it, because you'll still be able to see the columns. So you'll still be able to see what data, like what the actual data asset has in it. But you will not be able to, if you get denied access, which tested and it works pretty well. It literally just says you can't access, it's access blocked. But you'll be able to see the columns. I hit on this earlier, the encryption of the data is at rest and in transit. And it adheres to the privacy regulations like CGIS, FERPA, all the fun stuff. The role-based access control in the catalog specifically, there's 3 roles. There's admin, viewer, and editor. The admin is going to be, kind of what Eric was just talking about with the administration of the catalog or the agency. The editor is going to be any other data analyst that can get in the system and use it. The viewer is just going to be, I'm able to just get in and shop for data. The bottom bullet there, I wanted to point out, and I've kind of already talked about it, data protection rules apply to all the users. The only users that they do not apply to are going to be the catalog and asset owners, which are going to be the data stewards. That is because of the data quality and data profiling pieces. So you can't improve on your data quality if you can't see all the data. So do you have anything to add on that?
And just the cataloging of the data does not constitute data sharing.
Right.
Set up. Origin has a data set, he wants to put it in to leverage the tool. Something like that. Nothing is shared without an explicit action and intent with an executed scope of data is changed. So at that point, we just happen to be using a shared tool set. We're not actually sharing metadata until additional actions.
And I want to point out too is you can't extract data out of the catalog. So it's in there. You're just able to view it. There are some specific tools that, or data virtualization specifically, will allow us to be able to, going back to use case number 1 that we talked about, be able to send out externally to Core Connect, for example, And the data masking and privacy tools that were in the system will follow that. So if you don't have the ability to see the data, you will not see it even outside of the system for a data asset, which I think is really important because it's right now, to my knowledge, we have to export a data asset and do the masking and whatnot manually. Not manually, but systematically, but it's a separate process from this, whereas it just follows the data. Does that make sense? Are there any questions on this slide?
Yeah, so help me out. I'm simple, right? In a lot of ways. So the data going in, right? So is it like, I guess to back it up, right? We have a lot of junk data. How does that data get filtered before it gets into the system?
So
is it an effort on the department's part to
Yes.
clean up their own data and plug that in?
No, you plug it in, and there's a tool called metadata enrichment, which will pull it into a project, which a project is private. It's only people that are associated to that project can see that project. There's a tool in the system called metadata enrichment, where it pulls in the data and it does an attempt to clean it up and profile it and do the data quality dashboard for you. Now, we want to be very pointed here because we are not going to clean the data up in the system. We need the data to be cleaned up at the source. This tool is just going to be able to provide you insight to be like, hey, you have problems here. Now, it's in this table, it's in this column, go to the source and clean it up. I mean, essentially. So
It technically has
the capability to do it.
But I think the intent going all the way back to enriching legislation is to provide tools to facilitate to clean up at the source. Because that's where lots of other operational things. So that they just use this now. They're using it just to find things that are at play. So like, oh, there's an SSN in the column that's not supposed to be SSN, or just understanding and quality is fitness for use. There's no objective definition. It's like, we want this field to be 100% complete. No, it's 95% complete. Oh, we have duplicates over here and it should be unique. You know, like we have things in here that aren't fitting the valid format, right? And so it really depends on, how people feel. And it's kind of vary by every user and system. We're just trying to provide a quick tool set to look at that, because we could have a lot of data and you want to filter that noise out, make it really easy to separate the signal from the noise.
The systems come as you are with your data, and then we're going to tell you the system's going to tell you, hey, you've got issues here. So it just, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
It may not be issues. A field might only be 30% complete, and that could be completely fine. That's
right.
just how it is.
Yeah.
But if someone's going to go and use it from a different department that has no knowledge of that system, you don't want them to make a dependence on that and just assume it's 100%.
Right.
They don't see the values, but it's helpful to have an understanding that that's only 30% complete. But our system that we bought, it happens to have this field, but we don't use it, so it's completely empty.
And an example of that would be like an address line 2, because there's address line 1, and then if you have a PO box, you would have address line 2 or whatever. Not on everybody's address, they're going to complete that. So most of the time, that is a blank field, and so it would pop up in the system and say, hey, this has, out of 100 rows, it has 90% of it is incomplete and missing. And that may be okay, but that's up to the data steward that knows the data to be able to determine, okay, we expect that, right? So we got some more screenshots, and I know they're small and kind of blurry. So this is the default catalog in the system. This is what you would click on after, up at the top left it says default catalog. Imagine that says corrections master catalog. And it would have all the different assets that corrections has posted up to the catalog. All the rows down at the bottom, that would be your data assets. And then the middle blocks, there's also data assets with star reviews, which we haven't really dove into. Go ahead and go to the next slide. This is your overview page. So once you click into a data asset, the middle section with all the rows on the left side, that's going to be your column name. And there's technical metadata, there's business metadata, there's your quality score, a few other things, along with your governance artifacts, which is going to be your what policies are applying to this asset, what rules are applying to this asset, and just really an overview of the asset itself. Go ahead, Amy. This is I wish you could see it. This is what you would see if you are, say I'm a normal viewer and I'm trying to access my schema here is whatever one, and it's an employee manager, some dummy data. So if I'm trying to access the whatever one schema, because I maybe have identified some data that I want out of that employee manager table, and the data steward of that table has said, okay, we have these few columns that we want to redact, some obfuscate, but it's okay to be able to see most of the data in there. This is what you would see. So columns 2 and 3, they're all X's, they're redacted. So that's first name and last name. And these are just examples. There's an email in here that is doing some obfuscation. So it's literally just replacing what the format of an email. And then there's also a manager name in here that is also redacted. And it's all on the screenshot. Obviously, you can't see it, but that's just kind of some examples of redacted data and obfuscation. There's something we actually already did with corrections for some of their stuff. It's I think it's called ADC number. Does that ring a bell? Yes. So that if they're by law, if that number is 8,000 or 80,000, 8,000 and above, those rows have to be filtered out. They cannot be showing at all. So we've actually already done that in the system, and we were able to test where we were able to test it. We had 8,000 numbers, put that row in the system, and now those 8,000 numbers are not there. So we're able to apply to any of the regulations that are out there for agencies. So that was just an example of a real world thing that we've already done in the system. So. And obviously we can't show that because we don't want to show real data since it's going to be a public. So this is the data quality dashboard. The dummy data is clean. It's already been cleaned, but you can see, and you won't be able to see. So you get a quality score. There's 3 different metrics that it's going to really combine on to make that overall quality score, and then there's a few other things that are down below that kind of give you some more detail on what it's looking for and the scores for those. And so we wanted to, that's the main pieces of what we wanted to talk about today, but that's not all. And this really isn't all. There's a lot more. There's machine learning capabilities, there's AI model management capabilities, reference data management, which really goes along with, can you give some examples of reference data? So,
and reference data can be as simple as we have a list of county codes, a list of city place codes, like anywhere where it's helpful for us to all kind of share a common code set so that we're thinking the same language, especially like from courts, we're not having to resolve these differences. We're building in the ability to speak primary.
So there's also decision optimization, which I would love to go into more depth than just this, but I don't know if we have the time. Go ahead, Amy. Slide. And we have some business automation tools. So we have a very robust workflow builder, decision management that ties in nicely with the workflow builder, process mining, so being able to see your current processes of your systems, being able to see where there may be some inefficiencies, and being able to clean those processes up. And then robot process automation, which is small, administrative tasks that maybe we can stick some AI on.
Give me an example of like a small task that we on a.
But actually, just at APHSA conference, and I think it was Georgia uses the integrated eligibility system, and they were using RPA for. There's a lot of little manual things that have to get moved around and done. There's simple things, there's stuff that the case managers have to do over and over and over again. So almost like a macro. So using it to just like
So
cut
any
time
repetitive
out of
task.
the process by saying just, if this, we know that this can be, I mean, just change that.
Then we have a few integration tools that, so there's an enterprise API management tool that can really handle an entire enterprise's APIs under a single solution. The message queue, which is if a system, so message queue, I'm sure most of you are aware, is if I'm sending data to something, communicating with something, and system A is the one sending, system B is the one that goes offline. It's a queue to where that when that system B comes back online, those messages aren't lost. They go through. And then a big data transfer tool, which is the ability to send a lot of data. I think I'm not going to speculate because I know that I think I know, but I'm not going to speak. But massive data, because I mean, right now we have to use FTP. Drop secure is what we use to be able to transfer massive data. Whereas this tool will allow you to transfer that massive data, but not rely on your, and this is confusing, we can get into it, but not rely on your network conditions. It's a trademarked, I forget, IBM developed this piece that is specific to them. And I would love to get more into it if someone has some questions. So, but that's really the unlocking the tool set, but there's even more than just this, but these are some of the main things that we wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that we have. So, go ahead.
These are some of the things that can be layered on inside, even if you pull together a view, but the purpose of that view might be to put a business rule. That business rule says, like, whenever we get an intake from this, go check these things, and if we see that true, like, take this action. Go update something somewhere, go to post somebody. I think we're using that today with our common intake system. So we've got a place to city form where someone can go apply for multiple programs at once. And it's taking that and it's checking to make sure with the master data management understands the same person, and then checking rules to say, you indicated that you could be, have eligibility for adult education at Commerce. We obviously to check, are you already enrolled in adult education? Because we don't know if you're a pearl or not, but if you've indicated eligibility and you're not already there, then send it into that system. Set those rules out. I think there are options for more proactive program integrity. Checking, are they in certain things that can indicate ineligibility for on the front end? So the kind of the sky's the limit with the types of business rules. It's no coding. It's all very business user friendly, practical, very good. We were just really just drilling into kind of continuing that now we've sort of exploded out at the top, all like the different things. Not an extensive list. Once we've got this kind of common translation and governance layer, there's lots of, a very broad, a huge array of operational, analytical, evaluation, research, like policy support. Much more than we want to drill into today, we'd be happy to talk. We just mostly wanted to make sure that there was awareness. So if there's something that is a need now or in the future, like, it's there and we could like drill in and wherever.
For the status and timeline.
Data hub is operational. Super evaluation search, or when we get urgent needs, like for a while during the pandemic, we Medicaid clients and bounced them up against vaccination. A lot of things with reporting, checking for employment and earnings and credential attainment. Some things like educate the highest level of educational attainment. They're not in one system. It comes from a lot of different places in the city. But a lot of those things have been happening past several years, but now we've really kind of like gotten out the capacity of local community and start working and onboarding users. Active Directory, it's really just Steam and Active Directory. Like, who needs to start looking at this, get their head around this, and find like where it could be beneficial in your departments.
Yeah, Heather, do you want to chime in on that?
Right. No, I think that it's like, we'd love to hear from all of you guys on if you think you have a use case that you could apply these features to. And then we should reach out to Robert and myself and say, hey, we really think we could leverage this tool in this way. And I think that it's up to us to understand what is our resource capacity, what is the priority from a policy perspective on where we apply the tools first, and really start to think about what is the cost to the department, what is the cost for the rates, and how are we going to be able to use the data hub. But it is a shared service. It is a tool available to all of you guys. It is a shared tool set. So you may think, I want to start cataloging my data right away. That would be an easier first step. Everything has to come into the data catalog before we start to leverage the expanded capabilities. So that is a first step. And I think that that's something that you guys could tackle relatively quickly. And then when we start to look at different use cases, I think that that definitely becomes a leadership decision on where can we put our effort first.
So one of the, Heather mentioned potential use cases. So I mentioned this before in here, but one of the things that we want to create is a government services portal. So if you think about the way the banks have, kind of use your thumbprint and call up the bank and you can get your account and see your checking and mortgage. And right. So if you use that as an analogy to government services, and you put yourself in the shoes of an Arkansan, and you say, I'd like to see all the different ways that I interact with state government. Again, this is a vision, so don't get scared. All the different ways that I interact with state government. What do my taxes look like? What are my car registrations, game and fish license, any consumer-facing opportunity has the potential to be in something called the government services portal. And so TSS, BFA partnered. We've got a team that is working this. So Robert and Matthew and Heather are involved from the TSS side directly. And then Edith Pro, Autumn Hempel, and some others on the DFA side. And then Secretary Fiskin and Secretary Hudson are the overseers of this work. And it will be a use case that plugs into the data hub to actually provide that visualization ability across all of the different systems. Obviously, on the front end, we're not going to have everything. We're going to have a limited amount. Some of the people in this room and others from your departments have been kind of made aware of this. And so you can just kind of sit and look. That's totally fine. But if you're interested in getting more engaged, trying to be more sensitive earlier, you're welcome to that as well. Think about it as something that Arkansans would want to update themselves, like on your bank account. That's really where this thing would be most appropriate. Then where we are is we've got an alignment to an RFI draft, and that's in its final approval stages. We're working with Shane Phillips in procurement OSB, and so we're expecting that to be put out on the street here in the next several days. by the end of next week. And then we'll go through that RFI process, and our expectations that'll lead to an RFP. And then, I'll just use this as an opportunity to keep us updated for those.
An easy starting point there might be calendar appointments. If, a resident, hey, here's your consolidated, calendar appointments and at different conferences, the benefits of these kind of nudges and reminders to someone to just forget that they've got something to do. So that's less sensitive data. Also kind of sharing, like, hey, for this resident, these are their upcoming appointments that they might benefit from seeing a consolidated calendar view and getting those.
Tags are due next month. Is that so consumers, as in individual citizens, will access the hub in that case, or will there be sort of an external thing that communicates with the hub and the people are interacting with the external thing?
Where the views exist, I don't have another word for it, so I'm going to call it TV set. So TV set will be something that I envision through an RFP. Somebody will say, let me build a TV set. And then it comes up to data hub to access whatever portion of the 1,200 systems we have, those that are participating. But then still nothing happens yet, right? Until somebody says, hey, I'd like to sign up for that. We have to verify who you are, right? And that still doesn't solve me, and we'll make sure I got you correctly in the 1,200 systems. So a lot of that needs to be figured out. In terms of government services, this is really a pretty big leapfrog. There's nobody else that's doing this yet. So we're going to have to make sure that we tread carefully so we don't get out of our skis. But the idea would be to have something that's akin to what you have in your bank account. So someday you'd actually be able to move the money. Okay, I got my credit card bill. I just got my pay deposit in my checking account. I want to use that to pay my credit card bill. Oh, I'm going to get a car loan. Okay, let me check, and have all that in one view so you can actually act inside there as well.
This is then as kind of by demand. There's not going to be ultimately mandate that all the data, everyone has to subscribe to this, all the supply side.
No, but right now, I don't think anybody is thinking force either a department or an Arkansas to do a thing. This would all be, if there's value in the opportunity, then people will, if you build it, they will come. If it's a mousetrap that catches mice, people will want it. If it doesn't catch any mice, then it's waste my time.
But you still, in other words, I guess one thing I'm getting to is if you want access to some data, you're in a data discovery process, say, right? And so you're researching and you want access to data in another agency. You still have to go through the old-fashioned data sharing negotiation and begging and pleading and all that.
Everything still needs to be formalized in the appropriate agreements. We're trying to make it to streamline as much as possible. The Arkansas data sharing agreement, scope data exchange, provided a lot. Carrie Beckford's working with the Data Integration Support Center to further mature the process. And if, this to be people for wage data in particular, if instead of every time someone wants wage data, that's one of us frequent ask, it's an agreement. That Commerce sets up that pre-disclosure with the language right. If it is for official government business for this definition of program, they can look at it in this way, similar to like the way it's set up like for Swiss. We can reduce the frequency, kind of getting the real common ones taken care of and restricted.
I can see the benefits of it. I just think in terms of, there's still the opportunity for the data owner to say, no, we don't share that data.
Yes.
In that sense.
Yeah, and this tool will be able to provide you to be able, obviously, to do the data discovery, and then if agreed upon in a data sharing agreement, you can actually do the sharing within the system too. It really just provides you a tool to make it all easier.
Ideally, it's make it easier because a lot of the hesitation sometimes for sharing data is lack of capacity, or it's hard to do all or nothing data sharing. There's a lot of risk that goes with it to kind of like shift that to where if the utility without a corresponding increase in risk or impacting our community.
Because I can definitely see the advantage of response, so we don't have the bandwidth to get that data together.
So part of next step is maybe trying to connect you all with some of our folks to talk about use cases, right?
I think so. I think probably there would be a great opportunity to maybe have Matthew and our team come give a demonstration to your CIOs, your tech teams, the folks that might be interested in how the tool works.
Yeah.
Just be thinking about use cases, and then we start to have let's elevate those. Let's get a group together or get a few together for this group to come back and say, yes, that makes sense. Oh, we have some similar use cases. Let's tackle it from a enterprise approach.
We would love to do any workshops with you guys that, I mean, if you're interested,
Well, I'd love to. So I think there's several we could set some up, and I'll work on getting those set up because I think it's like dozens of use cases.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got reams and reams of data. Summer EBT is probably a good example of, we had to work with education to get a lot of data for that, right? Stand that up, get the cards out. And, the more you could automate that, the smoother that process works, right? Because every year that we've done summer EBT, we usually get money out. It'd be ideal to get the money out in May for these kids. Really what happens is more like July or August when the summer already ends. That's just because of the nature of getting the data and getting it to the right folks. But it's really probably more of a data issue than anything as far as the speed of it. So if you think like summer EBT, if the data processing, we could actually hit our marks getting it out, right? And probably that one immediately comes to mind, but there's dozens of other issues like that we can solve. So yeah, we'll work on that, and I'll be in touch with you, Heather, and we'll work on setting up some demonstrations.
That's great. I think that thinking about use cases, thinking about where we might be outsourcing these types of integration services right now, where it might be a benefit from a time and resource and cost savings perspective to your department to think about, we have a tool to insource this now. And then also thinking about it from the perspective that Charlie brought up, is they're putting out an RFI to have a resident-facing tool built, and they're going to leverage the internal tools when they're doing so. So we might be thinking about it from that perspective too. We have a resident-facing tool, and currently, again, we're outsourcing these integration services. We're not leveraging a data quality tool today. So how might we be able to rethink it from that perspective as well? And yes, we're ready to go on a road show. So just let us know. You can reach out to me directly or me and Robert, and we'll get it set up.
Where a need is this. We're not trying to make this hammer looking for a nail. But I think the key trigger is particularly interagency data sharing. That was the genesis of the reason for this. It can do a lot of other things, but that's probably kind of whenever we see this. How can we use this to streamline that process and more?
Matthew, you mentioned earlier about a demo. We'll put my CDO hat on, and I like to see the nuts and the bolts and how things work. Because then you can go into the use cases and say, what is this going to provide me? Then I can go back and look at what I have here. So I think a demo that would say, okay, I've got a SQL server and I need the data. And
I can absolutely
step us through the entire thing and says, here's my final product. Sure. And then we can start thinking about, I can see where that will help over.
Yeah, I can absolutely do that.
Great.
Thoughts, questions, observations? We have given you a lot to think about, so we can certainly look back to this individually, like for as a group. As far as, and got a little time if there's anything else or topics to bring up for next time. For the next meeting, we're looking at November 14th, for 21st of December tends to get so crazy with all these schedules and calendars. I think it's
What's the date?
either November 14th or November 21st as a preference there on which my.
Sorry, you were looking at me. I didn't know if you had.
No, I was
Okay.
I was kind of like putting it out the room to see one or both of those dates might work, or if there'd be a preference.
Thanksgiving holiday gonna fall since Thursday, maybe the 28th.
Yes, the 28th, yeah. The economic forecast online FACO is up.
Got one out. 14th.
Either day.
Oh, yeah, we'll send out a calendar invite reminder. Any other topics for discussion? It could be data hub, it could be future topics we need to discuss, or just any other.
Mentioned a meeting on October the 10th. What was that in reference to?
That is the AI Center of Excellence.
Sorry?
The first meeting of the AI Center of Excellence. We'll move on that here. But I find out what it's going to be. When that may. That's what we asked. Yeah, and we'll still be here a little bit after the meeting, and we got like some experts that can go super deep on any of the data technology stuff. I really appreciate your time and participation and sharing. It's been better. Thank you.
Thank you.